in-depth explanation on causes and retributions. After that was said, Ananda and all the great assembly immediately received the Tathagata's instruction in the secret seal, the meaning of Patra, and heard these names for the complete meaning of the sutra. They were suddenly enlightened to dhyana, advanced in their cultivation to the sagely position, and increased their understanding of the wonderful principle. Their minds were focused and serene. Ananda cut off and cast aside 6 sections of subtle afflictions in his cultivation of the mind in the triple realm. He arose from his seat, bowed at the Buddha's feet, placed his palms together respectfully, and said to the Buddha, "The great, mighty, and virtuous Bhagavan, whose compassionate sound knows no limit, has well instructed beings as to their extremely subtle submersion in delusion, and has caused me on this day to become blissful in body and mind, and to obtain enormous benefit. Bhagavan, if the wonderful brightness of this truly pure and wonderful mind is basically all-pervading, then everything on the great earth, including the grasses and trees, the wriggling worms and tiny forms of life, are originally true suchness, and are themselves the Tathagata true embodiments of Buddhahood. Since the Buddha's embodiments are true and real, how can there also be hells, hungry ghosts, animals, asuras, humans, gods, and other paths of rebirth? Bhagavan, do these paths exist naturally of themselves, or are they created by beings' falseness and habits? Bhagavan, the Bhikshuni precious lotus fragrance, for example, received the Bodhisattva precepts and then indulged in lustful desire, recklessly saying that sexual acts did not involve killing or stealing, and they carried no karmic retribution. But after saying that, her female organs caught fire, and then the raging blaze spread throughout all her joints as she fell into the unintermittent hell alive. And there were the mighty King Crystal and the Bhikshu Good Stars. Crystal exterminated the Gautama clan, and Good Stars recklessly said that all dharmas are empty. They both sank into the unintermittent hell alive. Are these hells fixed places, or do they arise spontaneously? Is it that each individual undergoes whatever kind of karma he or she creates? I only hope the Buddha will be compassionate and instruct those of us who do not understand this. May he cause all beings who uphold the precepts to receive this definitive instruction with joyful respect upon hearing it, and be careful not to transgress it." The Buddha said to Ananda, "What a good question! You want to keep all living beings from adopting deviant views. You should listen attentively now, and I will explain this matter for you. Actually, Ananda, all beings are fundamentally true and pure. But because of their false views, they give rise to the falseness of habits, which are divided into an internal aspect and an external aspect. Ananda, the internal aspect refers to what occurs inside living beings. Because of love and defilement, they produce the falseness of emotions. When these emotions accumulate without cease, they can create the fluids of love. That is why living beings' mouths water when they think about delicious food. When they think about a deceased person, either with fondness or with anger, tears will flow from their eyes. When they are greedy for wealth, a current of lust will course through their hearts and their skin will become lustrous. When their minds dwell on lustful conduct, spontaneous secretions will come from the male or female organ. Ananda, although the kinds of love differ, their flow and formation is the same. With this moisture, one cannot ascend, but will naturally fall. This is called the internal aspect. Ananda, the external aspect refers to what happens outside living beings. Because of longing and yearning, they give rise to fantasies. When these fantasies persist without cease, they can create an uplifting energy. That is why when living beings uphold the precepts in their minds, their bodies will be buoyant and feel light and clear. When they uphold mantra seals in their minds, they will command a heroic and resolute perspective. When they have the desire in their minds to be born in the heavens, in their dreams they will have thoughts of flying and ascending. When they cherish the Buddha lands in their minds, then the sagely realms will appear in a shimmering vision, and they will serve the good and wise advisors with little thought for their own lives. Ananda, although the thought varies, the lightness and uplifting nature is the same. With flight and ascension, one will not sink, but will naturally become transcendent. This is called the external aspect. Ananda, beings in the world are caught up in the continuity of birth and death. Birth happens because of their habitual tendencies. Death results in flow and change. When they are on the verge of dying, but when the final warmth has not left their bodies, all the good and evil they have done in that life suddenly and simultaneously manifest. They experience the intermingling of two habits, an abhorrence of death and an attraction to life. Endowed solely with thought, they will fly and can certainly be reborn in the heavens. If they fly into the heart with blessings and wisdom as well as pure vows, then their hearts will spontaneously open and they will see the Buddhas of the 10 directions in all their pure lands, and they will be reborn in whichever one they wish. When they have one more thought than emotion, they are not quite as ethereal and so have become flying immortals, great mighty ghost kings, space-traveling yakshas, or earth-traveling rakshasas, who roam the heaven of the 4 kings, going where they please without obstruction. Among them may be some with good vows and good hearts who will protect and uphold my dharma. Perhaps they protect the pure precepts by following and supporting those who hold precepts. Perhaps they protect holy mantras by following and supporting those who hold mantras. Perhaps they protect those who practice dhyana samadhi, so they can cultivate dharmic santi, forbearance. These beings will be close to the Tathagata beneath his seat. When their thought and emotion are of equal proportions, they neither fly nor fall, but are born into the human realm, where the brightness of thought leads to intelligence, and the darkness of emotion leads to dullness. When they have more emotion than thought, they enter the animal realm. With heavier emotion, they become fur-bearing beasts. With lighter emotion, they become winged creatures. When they have 70% emotion and 30% thought, they fall beneath the wheel of water and are bordering on the wheel of fire, where they experience the full force of the raging blaze. In the bodies of hungry ghosts, they are constantly burned to a crisp. Even water harms them, and they have nothing to eat or drink for hundreds of thousands of eons. When they have 90% emotion and 10% thought, they fall through the wheel of fire until their bodies enter a region where wind and fire interact. With lighter emotion, they are born in the intermittent hell. With heavier emotion, they are born in the unintermittent hell. When they are possessed entirely of emotion, they sink into the Avicii hell. If in their minds they slander the Mahayana, defame the Buddha's pure precepts, irrationally speak dharma, are greedy for offerings from the faithful, recklessly accept the respect of others, commit the 5 rebellious acts and the 10 major offenses, then they are further reborn in the Avicii hell throughout the 10 directions. Although one receives one's due according to the evil karma one has created, a group can undergo an identical lot, and there are definite places where it occurs. Ananda, it all comes from the karmic responses which living beings themselves invoke. They create 10 habitual causes and undergo 6 interacting retributions. What are the 10 causes? Ananda, the first consists of the habit of lustful intercourse, which gives rise to mutual rubbing. When this rubbing continues without cease, it activates a tremendous raging fire. Just as warmth arises between a person's hands when he rubs them together. Because these 2 habits set each other ablaze, there comes into being the iron bed, the copper pillar, and other such experiences. Therefore, the Tathagatas of the 10 directions look upon the act of lust and name it the fire of desire. Bodhisattvas avoid desire as they would a fiery pit. The second consists of the habit of greedy scheming, which gives rise to a suction. When the suction continues without cease, it produces intense cold and solid ice where freezing occurs. Just as a sensation of cold is experienced when a person draws in a blast of wind through his mouth. Because these 2 habits clash together, there comes into being cold hells such as chattering, whimpering, and shuddering, blue, red, and white lotuses, and other such experiences. Therefore, the Tathagatas of the 10 directions look upon excessive seeking and name it the water of greed. Bodhisattvas avoid greed as they would a sea of pestilence. The third consists of habits of arrogance and resulting friction, which gives rise to mutual intimidation. When it accelerates without cease, it produces torrents and rapids which create restless waves of water. Just as water is produced when a person continually works his tongue in an effort to taste flavors. Because these 2 habits incite one another, there comes into being a river of blood, the river of ashes, the burning sand, the poisonous sea, the molten copper which is forced down one's throat, and other such experiences. Therefore, the Tathagatas of the 10 directions look upon self-satisfaction and name it drinking the water of stupidity. Bodhisattvas avoid arrogance as they would a huge deluge. The fourth consists of habits of hatred, which give rise to mutual defiance. When this defiance binds one without cease, one's heart becomes so hot that it catches fire, and the molten vapors turn into metal. From it is produced the mountain of knives, the iron cudgel, the tree of swords, the wheel of swords, axes and halberds, and spears and saws. It is like when a person harbors a grudge and the urge to kill surges forth. Because these 2 habits clash with one another, there comes into being castration and hacking, beheading and mutilation, filing and sticking, flogging and beating, and other such experiences. Therefore, the Tathagatas of the 10 directions look upon hatred and name it sharp knives and swords. Bodhisattvas avoid hatred as they would a massacre. The fifth consists of habits of deception and misleading involvements which give rise to mutual guile. When such maneuvering continues without cease, it produces ropes for strangling and wood for imprisoning. It is like how grass and trees grow in an irrigated field. Because the two habits perpetuate one another, there comes into being handcuffs and fetters, canes and locks, whips and clubs, sticks and cudgels, and other such experiences. Therefore, the Tathagatas of the 10 directions look upon deception and name it a treacherous crook. Bodhisattvas fear deception as they would a savage wolf. The sixth consists of the habit of lying combined with continual fraudulence, which gives rise to mutual cheating. When false accusations continue without cease, one becomes adept at corruption. From this there comes into being such filthy impurities as dirt, excrement, and urine. It is like the obscuring of one's vision when the dust is stirred up by the wind. Because these two habits augment one another, there come into being sinking and drowning, tossing and pitching, flying and falling, floating and submerging, and other such experiences. Therefore, the Tathagatas of the 10 directions look upon lying and name it robbery and murder. Bodhisattvas regard lying as they would treading on a venomous snake. The seventh consists of the habits of enmity and mutual suspicion, which gives rise to grievances. From this there come into being the experiences of being pelted by flying rocks or gravel, being imprisoned in a box car or urn, and being bagged and struck. It is like a treacherous person who harbors evil in his mind. Because these two habits swallow one another up, there come into being tossing, pitching, seizing, striking, and banging, and other such experiences. Therefore, the Tathagatas of the 10 directions look upon animosity and name it a perverse and harmful ghost. Bodhisattvas regard animosity as they would drinking poisonous wine. The eighth consists of the habit of expressing wrong views, such as those of satkaya dristi, prohibitions, grasping, and other deviant insights, and the karma involved in these, which result from contradiction and opposition. From these there come into being court officials and deputies holding documents, whom one meets as if they were people coming and going on the road. Because these two habits influence one another, there come into being official inquiries, baited questions, examinations, interrogations, public investigations, exposure, the youths who record good and evil, carrying the record books of the offender's arguments and rationalizations, and other such experiences. Therefore, the Tathagatas of the 10 directions look upon evil views and name them the pit of views. Bodhisattvas regard having false and one-sided views as they would standing on the edge of a steep ravine full of poison. The ninth consists of the habit of injustice that comes from instigating false charges and libeling. From them are produced crushing between mountains, crushing between rocks, stone rollers, stone grinders, plowing and grinding. It is like a slanderous villain who engages in persecuting good people unjustly. Because these two habits join ranks, there come into being pressing and pushing, bludgeons and compulsion, squeezing and straining, weighing and measuring, and other such experiences. Therefore, the Tathagatas of the 10 directions look upon harmful accusations and name them a treacherous tiger. Bodhisattvas regard injustice as they would a bolt of lightning. The 10th consists of the habits of litigation and the mutual disputations which give rise to covering. From them are produced the mirror that reflects and the lamp that shines, exposing one just as if one were in direct sunlight and had no way to hide one's shadow. Because these two habits bicker back and forth, there come into being evil companions, the mirror of karma, the fiery pearl, the exposure of past karma, inquests, and other such experiences. Therefore, all the Tathagatas of the 10 directions look upon covering and name it a hidden villain. Bodhisattvas regard covering as they would having to carry a mountain atop their heads while walking upon the sea. What are the 6 retributions? Ananda, all living beings create karma with their 6 consciousnesses. The evil retributions they call down upon themselves will come from the 6 sense organs. What are the evil retributions that arise from the 6 sense organs? The first is the retribution of seeing, which brings an evil result. The karma of seeing intermingles so that at the time of death one first sees a raging conflagration, which fills the 10 directions. The deceased one's spiritual consciousness takes flight but then falls. Riding on a wisp of smoke, it enters the unintermittent hell. There, 2 kinds of phenomena may occur. The first is clear perception, in which one sees all sorts of evil things. This causes one to experience boundless fear. The second is obscure perception, which is a stillness devoid of seeing. This causes one to experience boundless terror. When the fire that comes from seeing burns the sense of hearing, it becomes cauldrons of boiling water and molten copper. When it burns the breath, it becomes black smoke and purple fumes. When it burns the sense of taste, it becomes scorching hot pellets of molten iron gruel. When it burns the sense of touch, it becomes white-hot embers and glowing coals. When it burns the mind, it becomes sparks of fire that shower everywhere and whip up and inflame the entire realm of space. The second is the retribution of hearing, which brings an evil result. The karma of hearing intermingles, and thus at the time of death, one first sees gigantic waves that drown the whole world. The deceased one's spiritual consciousness falls into the water and rides the current into the unintermittent hell. There, two kinds of phenomena may occur. One is open hearing, in which it hears all sorts of noise and its essential spirit becomes confused. The other is closed hearing, in which there is a stillness devoid of hearing, and its soul sinks into oblivion. When the waves from hearing flow into the hearing, they become scolding and interrogation. When they flow into the seeing, they become thunder and roaring and evil poisonous vapors. When they flow into the breath, they become rain and fog permeated with poisonous organisms that entirely fill up the body. When they flow into the sense of taste, they become pus and blood and every kind of filth. When they flow into the sense of touch, they become animals and ghosts and excrement and urine. When they flow into the mind, they become lightning and hail which ravage the heart and soul. The third is the retribution of smelling, which brings an evil result. The karma of smelling intermingles, and thus at the time of death, one first sees a poisonous vapor that permeates the atmosphere near and far. The deceased one's spiritual consciousness wells up out of the earth and enters the unintermittent hell. There, two kinds of phenomena may occur. One is penetrating smelling, in which one is thoroughly infused with the evil vapors and one's mind becomes distressed. The other is blocked smelling, in which one's breath is cut off and there is no passage, and one lies stifled and suffocating on the ground. When the vapor of smelling invades the breath, it becomes cross-examination and torture. When it invades the seeing, it becomes fire and torches. When it invades the hearing, it becomes sinking and drowning, molten metal and boiling liquids. When it invades the sense of taste, it becomes putrid or rancid foods. When it invades the sense of touch, it becomes the actions of ripping apart and beating to a pulp. It also becomes a huge mountain of flesh, which has hundreds of thousands of eyes and which is sucked and fed upon by numerous worms. When it invades the mind, it becomes ashes, pestilent air, and flying sand and gravel which cut the body to ribbons. The fourth is the retribution of tasting, which brings an evil result. This karma of tasting intermingles, and thus at the time of death one first sees an iron net ablaze with raging fire that covers over the entire world. The deceased one's spiritual consciousness passes down through this hanging net, and suspended upside down it enters the unintermittent hell. There, two kinds of phenomena may occur. One is a sucking air which congeals into ice so that it freezes the flesh of his body until it bursts open. The other is a spitting blast of air which spews out a raging fire that roasts his bones and marrow to a crisp. When the tasting of flavors passes through the sense of taste, it becomes what must be acknowledged and what must be endured. When it passes through the seeing, it becomes burning metal and stones. When it passes through the hearing, it becomes sharp weapons and knives. When it passes through the sense of smell, it becomes a vast iron cage that encloses the entire land. When it passes through the sense of touch, it becomes bows and arrows, crossbows and darts. When it passes through the mind, it becomes flying pieces of molten iron that rain down from out of space. The fifth is the retribution of touching, which brings an evil result. The karma of touching intermingles, and thus at the time of death, one first sees huge mountains closing in on one from four sides, leaving no path to escape. The deceased one's spiritual consciousness then sees a vast iron city. Fiery snakes and fiery dogs, wolves, lions, ox-headed jailkeepers, and the horse-headed rakshasas, brandishing spears and lances, drive it into the iron city toward the unintermittent hell. There, two kinds of phenomena may occur. One is touch that involves coming together, in which mountains come together to squeeze its body until its flesh, bones, and blood are totally dispersed. The other is touch that involves separation, in which knives and swords attack the body, ripping the heart and liver to shreds. When this touching passes through the sensation of touch, it becomes colliding, striking, stabbing, and piercing. When it passes through the seeing, it becomes burning and scorching. When it passes through the hearing, one hears the sounds on the path to the hells, at the gate of the hells, and in the courts of trial. When it passes through the sense of smell, it becomes enclosures, bags, interrogation, and binding up. When it passes through the sense of taste, it becomes plowing, pinching, chopping, and severing. When it passes through the mind, it becomes falling, flying, frying, and broiling. The sixth is the retribution of thinking, which brings an evil result. The karma of thinking intermingles, and thus at the time of death one first sees a foul wind which devastates the land. The deceased one's spiritual consciousness is blown up into space, and then spiraling downward, it rides that wind straight into the unintermittent hell. There, two kinds of phenomena may occur. One is extreme confusion, which causes it to be frantic and to race about ceaselessly. The other is not confusion, but rather an acute awareness which causes it to suffer from endless roasting and burning, the extreme pain of which is difficult to bear. When this deviant thought combines with thinking, it becomes locations and places. When it combines with seeing, it becomes inspection and testimonies. When it combines with hearing, it becomes huge crushing rocks, ice and frost, dirt and fog. When it combines with smelling, it becomes a great fiery car, a fiery boat, and a fiery jail. When it combines with tasting, it becomes a loud calling, wailing, and regretful weeping. When it combines with touch, it becomes sensations of large and small, where 10,000 births and 10,000 deaths are endured every day, and of lying with one's face to the ground. Ananda, these are called the 10 causes and 6 retributions of hell, which are all created by the confusion and falseness of living beings. If living beings create this evil karma simultaneously, they enter the Avicii hell and endure limitless suffering, passing through limitless kalpas. If each of the 6 sense organs creates them, and if what is done includes each state and each sense organ, then the person will enter the 8 unintermittent hells. If the 3 karmas of body, mouth, and mind commit acts of killing, stealing, and lust, the person will enter the 18 hells. If the 3 karmas are not involved, and there is perhaps just 1 act of killing and 1 act of stealing, then the person must enter the 36 hells. If the sense organ of sight alone commits just 1 karmic offense, then the person must enter the 108 hells. Because of this, living beings who do certain things create certain karma, and so in the world they enter collective hells, which arise from false thinking and which originally are not there at all. And then, Ananda, after the living beings who have slandered and broken the precepts, violated the Bodhisattva precepts, slandered the Buddha's nirvana, and created various kinds of karma, passed through many kalpas of being burned in the inferno, they finally finish paying for their offenses and are reborn as ghosts. If greed for material objects was the original cause that made the person commit offenses, then after he has finished paying for his crimes, he will take shape when he encounters material objects and will become a strange ghost. If it was indulgence in lust that made the person commit offenses, then after he has finished paying for his crimes, he will take shape when he encounters the wind and will become a drought ghost. If it was indulgence in lying that made this person commit offenses, then after he has finished paying for his crimes, he will take shape when he encounters animals and will become a May ghost. If it was hatred that made the person commit offenses, then after he has finished paying for his crimes, he will take shape when he encounters worms and insects and will become a goo poison ghost. If it was the harboring of grudges that made the person commit offenses, then after he has finished paying for his crimes, he will take shape when he encounters degeneration and will become a pestilence ghost. If it was arrogance that made the person commit offenses, then after he has finished paying for his crimes, he will take shape when he encounters gases and will become a hungry ghost. If it was injustice to others that made the person commit offenses, then after he has finished paying for his crimes, he will take shape when he encounters darkness and will become a paralysis ghost. If it was attachment to wrong views that made the person commit offenses, then after he has finished paying for his crimes, he will take shape when he encounters essential energy and will become a Wang Liang ghost. If it was deception that made the person commit offenses, then after he has finished paying for his crimes, he will take shape when he encounters brightness and will become a servant ghost. If it was the practice of forming factions that made the person commit offenses, then after he has finished paying for his crimes, he will take shape when he encounters people and will become a messenger ghost. Ananda, such a person's fall is due to his totally emotional level of functioning. When his karmic fire has burned out, he will rise up to be reborn as a ghost. This is occasioned by his own karma of false thinking. If he awakens to Bodhi, then in the wonderful perfect brightness, there isn't anything at all. Moreover, Ananda, when his karma as a ghost is ended, and the consequences of his emotion and thought are over, he comes into the world to meet his creditors and to settle his accounts with them. He is born as an animal to repay his debts from past lives. The retribution of the strange ghost of material objects is finished when the object is destroyed and it is reborn in the world, usually as a species of owl. The retribution of the drought ghost of the wind is finished when the wind subsides and it is reborn in the world, usually as a species of uncanny creature which gives inauspicious prognostications. The retribution of the May ghost of an animal is finished when the animal dies, and it is reborn in the world, usually as a species of fox. The retribution of the goo ghost in the form of worms and insects is finished when the goo is exhausted, and it is reborn in the world, usually as a species of venomous creature. The retribution of a pestilence ghost found in degeneration is finished when the degeneration is complete, and it is reborn in the world, usually as a species of tapeworm. The retribution of a ghost which takes shape in gases is finished. When the gases are gone, it is then reborn in the world, usually as a species of animal used for food. The retribution of ghost of darkness is finished when the darkness ends, and it is then reborn in the world, usually as a species of animal used for clothing or service. The retribution of the ghost which unites with energy is finished when the union dissolves, and it is then reborn in the world, usually as a species of migratory creature. The retribution of the ghost of brightness and intellect is finished when the brightness disappears, and it is then reborn in the world, usually as a species of efficacious creature. The retribution of the ghost that relies on a person is finished when the person dies, and it is then reborn in the world, usually as a species of domestic animal. Ananda, all this is due to the burning out of his karmic fire in payment for his debts from past lives. The rebirth as an animal is also occasioned by his own false and empty karma. If he awakens to Bodhi, then fundamentally none of these false conditions will exist at all. You mentioned precious lotus fragrance, king crystal, and bhikshu good stars. Evil karma such as theirs was created by them alone. It did not fall down out of the heavens or well up from the earth, nor was it imposed upon them by some person. Their own falseness brought it into being, and so they themselves have to undergo it. In the Bodhi heart, it is empty and false, a cohesion of false thoughts. Moreover, Ananda, if while repaying his past debts by undergoing rebirth as an animal, such a living being pays back more than he owed, he will then be reborn as a human to rectify the excess. If the creditor is a person with strength, blessings, and virtue, then he can pay what he collected in excess without having to lose his human form. But if he lacks blessings, then he will be reborn as an animal to pay the outstanding balance. Ananda, if the debt involves money, material goods, or manual labor, and then once it is paid, the debt is resolved. But if in the process of repayment the lives of other beings were taken or their flesh eaten, then it will start a cycle of mutual devouring and slaughtering that will send the debtors and creditors up and down endlessly for as many eons as there are atoms of universe. There is no way to put a stop to it, except through shamatha or through a Buddha's coming to the world. You should know that when the owls and their kind have paid back their debts, they regain their original form and are born as obstinate people. When creatures that are inauspicious have paid back their debts, they regain their original form and are born as abnormal people. When foxes have paid back their debts, they regain their original form and are born as people who are simpletons. When creatures of the venomous category have paid back their debts, they regain their original form and are born as malicious people. When tapeworms and the like have paid back their debts, they regain their original form and are born as lovely people. When edible types of creatures have paid back their debts, they regain their original form and are reborn as weak people. When creatures that are used for clothing or service have paid back their debts, they regain their original form and are reborn as people who do hard labor. When creatures that migrate have paid back their debts, they regain their original form and are reborn as literary people. When efficacious creatures have paid back their debts, they regain their original form and are reborn as intelligent people. When domestic animals have paid back their debts, they regain their original form and are reborn as sophisticated people. Ananda, these are all beings that have finished paying back former debts and are born again in the human realm. They are involved in a beginningless scheme of karma and delusion and spend their lives killing and being killed by one another. They do not get to meet the Tathagata or hear the proper Dharma. They just abide in the wearisome dust, passing through a repetitive cycle. Such people can truly be called pitiful. Furthermore, Ananda, there are people who do not rely on proper enlightenment to cultivate samadhi, but cultivate in some special way that is based on their false thinking. Holding to the idea of perpetuating the physical bodies, they roam in the mountains and forests in places people do not go and become 10 kinds of immortals. Ananda, Some living beings with unflagging resolution make themselves strong with specially prepared foods. When they have perfected this method of dieting, they are known as earth-traveling immortals. Some of these beings with unflagging resolution make themselves strong through the use of grasses and herbs. When they have perfected this method of taking herbs, they are known as flying immortals. Some of these beings with unflagging resolution make themselves strong through the use of metal and stone. When they have perfected this method of transformation, they are known as roaming immortals. Some of these beings with unflagging resolution make themselves strong through movement and stillness. When they have perfected their energy and essence, they are known as space-traveling immortals. Some of these beings with unflagging resolution make themselves strong by using the flow of saliva. When they have perfected their virtues of this moisture, they are known as the heaven-traveling immortals. Some of these beings with unflagging resolution make themselves strong with the essence of sun and moon. When they have perfected the inhalation of this essence, they are known as the all-penetrating immortals. Some of these beings with unflagging resolution make themselves strong through mantras and precepts. When they have perfected these skills, they are known as immortals of the way. Some of these beings with unflagging resolution make themselves strong through the use of thought processes. When they have perfected thought and memory, they are known as illuminating immortals. Some of these beings with unflagging resolution make themselves strong through internal union. When they have perfected the response, they are known as immortals of essence. Some of these beings with unflagging resolution make themselves strong through transformations. When they have perfected their awakening, they are known as immortals of the ultimate level. Ananda, these are all people who smelt their minds but do not cultivate proper enlightenment. They obtain some special principle of life and can live for thousands or tens of thousands of years. They retire deep into the mountains or onto islands in the sea and cut themselves off from the human realm. However, they are still part of the turning wheel because they flow and turn according to their false thinking and do not cultivate samadhi. When their reward is finished, they must still return and enter the various destinies. Ananda, there are many people in the world who do not seek what is eternal, and who cannot yet renounce the love that exists between themselves and their wives, but they have no interest in sexual misconduct, and so their purity develops and their light is revealed. When their life ends, they are born in the heaven of the four kings next to the sun and moon. Those whose sexual love for their wives is slight, but who have not yet obtained the complete purity when dwelling in solitude, transcend the light of sun and moon at the end of their lives, and reside at the summit of the human realm. Such people are born in the Triyastrimsha heaven. Those who become temporarily involved when they meet with desire, but who do not dwell upon it when it is finished, and who, while in the human realm, are active less and quiet more, abide at the end of their lives in light and emptiness, where the illumination of sun and moon does not reach. These beings have their own light, and they are born in the Suyama heaven. Those who are quiet all the time, but who are not yet able to resist when stimulated by contact, ascend at the end of their lives to a subtle and ethereal place. They will not be drawn into the lower realms. The destruction of the realms of humans and gods and the three disasters at the end of the kalpa will not reach them, for they are born in the Tushita heaven. Those who are devoid of desire, but who will engage in it for the sake of their partner, even though to them the experience is as flavorless as chewing wax, are born at the end of their lives in the transcendental place of transformations. They are born in the Nirmana Rataya heaven, bliss by transformation heaven. Those who have no worldly thoughts while doing what worldly people do, who are lucid beyond such activity while involved in it, are capable at the end of their lives of entirely transcending states where transformations may be present or absent. They are born in the Paranamita Vasavartan, comfort from others' transformations heaven. Ananda, although the beings in the six heavens have physically transcended desire, traces of it still remain in their minds. The levels of existence so far discussed are known as the realm of desire. This is the end of Chapter 8.